Quadratic equation is an equation of second degree. Second degree, that is, remember, you look at your exponent and it tells you your degrees. In this case, your highest exponent is a 2, all right? And so the type of equation that is created when you have an exponent of 2 is called a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation. Standard form, that is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So standard form typically does go highest to lowest. We talked about that when we did polynomials. In this case, we have some terms that we're actually going to use. That a, b, and c are going to come into play when we start solving it. And they notice that a cannot be 0. If a were 0, this would actually be a linear equation because you would just have a highest exponent of 1. Highest exponent of 1 if that was 0. So we're looking at a degree of 2. The first way we're going to solve is by factoring. And so it's kind of important to remind yourself of something that you knew from really early on with multiplication. When you multiply something by 0, you get 0. So if you have an equation equal to 0 and it's two things being multiplied, x times y equals 0, one of those numbers must be 0 for that to happen. All right? So if I'm multiplying two factors of something and it equals 0, one of those factors has to be 0. At least one. They both could be. And so that's what we're going to use to solve in this first section here. They have this equation, x minus 5 times x plus 2 equals 0. Well, this is one of the terms, and this is the other term, and they equal 0 when you multiply. So if we want to know what x is, we can set each of those terms equal to 0. Because in order for that to be true, we know at least one of them has to be. So my options for x are, if the first one is 0, that would make this a true statement. Or if the second one were 0, that would also make it a true statement. So if I'm looking for the solution to something like this, I am just going to set each of my factors equal to 0 and solve for what it could be. And usually once you do this, you have a pretty easy equation to solve. This first one, I would just add my 5 to both sides. So x could potentially be positive 5. For this one, I would subtract my 2 from both sides. So x could also be negative 2. And so those are my two options here. Positive 5, negative 2. Those are my options. Solving by factoring. This one's already factored, so I don't have to worry about changing it. It's already in factored form. Look at example 2. Example 2. Example 2 is not in factored form. You'll notice that it is in standard form. I have x squared x and a number, and it's equal to 0. And so if I want to solve this, you're not going to subtract the 12 over and try to get something by itself. You are going to factor. And so I'm going to do just like I did on my bell work. What are factors of 12 that add up to 8? Factors of 12 that add up to 8. Yeah, so I'm going to factor this x plus 6, x plus 2. And we can double check it. If I were to multiply positive 6 and positive 2, I would get positive 12. If I were to add positive 6 and positive 2, I would get positive 8. Now that I have it in factored form, I can go and do what I did on example 1. If I want to solve for x, I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. And then I have a really simple solution. Subtract 6 from both sides. X could potentially be negative 6. Subtract 2. X could be negative 2. And if I were to go back and check it and plug it in up here, you would find those give me a true statement. Plug in a negative 6 for every x or plug in a negative 2 for every x, you are going to get 0. And so these are my answers to that problem. So this section is all about solving by factoring. So this one looks a little bit different. This is not a trinomial. How would I factor this? What's your first step in factoring? What am I going to look for? Yeah, what's in common? So what's in common between 8x squared and negative 16x? What can I take out? I can take out an 8. What about variables? I can take out an x. Remember, my lowest one comes out. So 8 divided by 8 is 1. I had two x's. I took out 1. This is going to be a 1x. Minus 16 divided by 8 is 2. And I took out my x that was there. Here's the thing. I still have two factors. So I'm still going to set each one equal to 0. Now, if I had not taken out a variable, then I wouldn't have to set it equal to 0. If that had just been an 8, I can't set 8 equal to 0. There is no variable to solve for in that factor, okay? But there is a variable to solve for in this one. I can divide both sides by 8. So x can equal what from that one? 0 divided by 8 is 0. Here I'm going to add 2. So x could be 0 or 2. Those are my two answers there. 0 or 2. So there are going to be times when you factor like trinomial and you have two groups, and there are going to be sometimes when you just pull out a common factor. All right, but anytime you have squared, you're likely going to have two answers here for this level of math. All right, for this level of math, you're going to look for two answers. So just to point out, this is just x equals 2 and -4. When you see it like this is a set. Remember we did sets at the very beginning of the year, number sets. This is the solution set. So these are two valid ways to write the answers, okay? One is a solution set with your little brackets. It's saying x could be 0 and x could be 1. These are both solutions to this answer, or they just listed what x equals. So the first thing it tells us is solving the equations. These are your steps. So for those of you that are words people and you want to see it in words, this is what you're doing. Write the equation in standard form. So to solve by factoring, it has to be in standard form first. Ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. You cannot solve by factoring if it is not equal to 0. Then you are going to factor it. Take out your common factor. Factor it if you need to break it up into groups. You're going to set each factor equal to 0, solve the equations, and then you can always check it by going back to your original and plugging it in. This one right here, we do have a common factor. What is it? Yeah, so 2 comes out of everything. So I have a 2 on the outside. I have x squared plus 4x minus 21 equals 0. All right, now here's the thing. I'm not going to set that 2 equal to 0 because 2 is never equal to 0. When you are solving by factoring, that 2 is kind of insignificant. Now, if I said just factor it and not solve, you would leave the 2 there because it is part of your factoring. But when I am solving, think about it this way. I could go ahead and divide both sides by 2, correct? It's already on the outside, so I can divide it. On the left-hand side, it cancels. What is 0 divided by 2? It is just 0. So now I have x squared plus 4x minus 21 equals 0. So when you take out just a constant, no variable, just a constant, it's insignificant. It divides itself out of there. You don't have to do anything with the constant. Now if I pulled out a 2x or a 3x or something like that, I can't ignore it. I have to set it equal to 0 if there's a variable in it. But if I take just a number out, it's going to divide itself out. And so you just have to worry about what's on the inside. So now I'm going to say, what are factors of -21 that add up to +4? How do I multiply to get -21 and add to get +4? Yeah, so I'm going to do a +7 and a -3. X plus 7, x minus 3. You can check it. Positive 7 times negative 3 is negative 21. Positive 7 plus negative 3 is positive 4. And then I'm going to set each group equal to 0. X plus 7 equals 0. X minus 3 equals 0. So my x's, if I subtract the 7 over, will be negative 7 and positive 3. Now, standard form says that I have to have everything on one side and 0 on the other, all right? That is what standard form tells me. And so in order to do that, I need to get that 147 over on the other side. This is not standard form. So if I'm solving this by factoring, and we're actually going to solve some of these a different way tomorrow, but in this section, solving by factoring means I have to have a 0. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that, and I am going to subtract it over. So I'm going to subtract that 147 to both sides. So on the left-hand side, I cannot combine them because they're not alike. So I have 3x squared minus 147, and that equals 0. All right? What's my first step? I look for what? A common factor. Is there a common factor? Yeah, 3 actually goes into both of those, right? And so I can divide out that 3. So I'm going to take a 3 out here. I have x squared minus 3 goes into 14 4 times. With a 2 left over, 3 goes into 27 9 times, equal to 0. Now remember I said when I have a constant come out, it can just divide itself out, right? So for solving purposes, that 3 just divides itself right out, and I have just x squared minus 49 equals 0. This is a special case. How do I factor x squared minus 49? It's 2 perfect squares, right? Plus 7 minus 7, right? Plus 7 minus 7. So I'm going to say x plus 7, x minus 7. That is my factoring. My final step is to set each one equal to 0 and solve. So x is going to equal either negative 7 or positive 7. All right, so far we've only had ones with squares, all right? What you'll notice about this one is that we have something cubed, all right, cubed. So we are going to move everything to one side first, and then we're going to look for some common factors. So I'm going to take this equation, and I'm going to move everything to one side, all right? So I am going to subtract the 14x squared over, and I'm going to subtract the 8x over. So both of these are going to come over here. And now I will have 0 over there. They're not like terms, so I'm going to say 4x cubed minus 14x squared minus 8x equals 0. All right? Now, remind me, what is my first step when I'm factoring? What do I look for? So what do I have a like across the board here? So I have a 2 that comes out of the numbers, right? And then an x that comes out of the variables. So I'm going to say 2x on the outside. I'm going to be left with 2x squared minus 7x minus 4. All right? Now let's look at this guy. What do I do when I have a leading coefficient? Meaning, what do I do when I have not something other than a 1 there? What's my method? Y'all remember? We're going to multiply across, remember? So 2 times negative 4 gives me what? Now I need factors of negative 8 that add up to negative 7. What are they? Yeah, so I'm going to say a negative 8 and a positive 1, right? Everybody agree with that? Negative 8 times positive 1 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. So with this guy, I cannot just divide him out because he has a variable, all right? So he's going to stay out here. And then I'm going to rewrite that middle, 2x squared. Right here, I'm going to replace it with these, right? So I have minus 8x plus 1x, and then I leave this one alone, minus 4. How do I factor 4 terms? What is my method for factoring 4 terms? Right, grouping. We're going to group it with parentheses. So I am going to group the first 2 and group the last 2, right? Leave this guy alone. Leave him out there, 2x. What can I take out of 2x squared minus 8x? Another 2x, and I'm left with x minus 4. If nothing comes out, what do I put on the outside? A 1. And I have x minus 4, which is how it should always be when you're doing this. And my final step of factoring, I still have that 2x. My common guy is x minus 4. And my leftover is 2x plus 1. All right. Now I'm going to set every single one of those equal to 0. All of them. There's 3 this time, not 2. So I'm going to take the 2x and set it equal to 0. The x minus 4 and set it equal to 0. The 2x plus 1 and set it equal to 0. And then I'm going to solve. This guy, divide both sides by 2. X will equal what? 0. Next one, add 4. From this one, x is going to equal 4. Here I'm going to subtract 1. I have 2x equals negative 1. Then I'm going to divide by 2. So x equals negative 1/2. You'll notice I have 3 answers here. All right, here's a clue. What was my degree of this guy? My degree was 3. I had 3 answers, all right? If your degree is 2, you're likely going to have 2 answers. Even on the one that had negative 3, you actually had negative 3, negative 3. You just don't have to list it twice, okay? So when you see something to the 3rd power, you're probably going to pull an x out of it, and you're going to factor it, okay? But you're still going to have 3 answers, 0, 4, and negative 1/2, all right? 0, 4, and negative 1/2.